I'm your host, Doreen Steenland, and today I'd like to welcome our guest, Michael Leiter. So, your book with Christina Maslach, The Burnout Challenge, urges readers to collaborate, customize, and commit. So, how does that actually work in large organizations attempting to develop a more engaging, less burnout prone workplace environment?
Okay, and it's a big job, basically doing that. Writing about job burnout is something that I've been doing for quite a while, and a lot of it with Christina Maslach. We've been collaborating for many years together on these things. And the Burnout Challenge, our most recent book, sort of pulls together a lot of these ideas and thoughts that we've been developing over really a few decades of collaboration. And saying this is what we've learned from all of that kind of work. And a big part of it is that one, that burnout, when you look at burnout, it often gets described as something internal to a person, that the person is experiencing where they are, that it's a quality of the individual. And we look at it and say, really, it's a quality of the relationship of the person with their workplace. And that really, it's where you want to look is what's going on between those two. Like the issue isn't so much what's inside of the person as it is this dialogue, this interaction, the give and take or the take and take between people in their workplaces is really where the dynamics are and where we need to really be looking for what's the solution, what is the kind of action to take on that.
I would love to stop you there for a second because what I've noticed, and I'm sure you've discovered this in your research, is many times workplaces want to blame the person as being the problem, the burnt out person, when in fact it is the relationship. That is something huge that you just said. It's the relationship between the person with burnout and their job. So relationships go both ways, right?
They go both ways. And if you got a relationship problem, it doesn't help to tell your partner to go fix themselves.
Yes.
Get yourself together, and then
Or
I'll deal
throw
with
them
you.
a yoga
No,
class, right? That doesn't help, right?
that doesn't help. No, you've got to work out what's going on between us here.
Yeah.
That's getting in the way. And I think that's we look at that's the model on personal relationships, but it's also that relationship between people and this entity of work that is such a big part of their lives. So we look at that. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Go ahead, say
yeah.
more. I want to hear more
So
about some.
and so that's where right. It's got to be a collaborative effort, and that's where we go. Like it isn't that what the employer needs to provide some resources and EAP resources or whatever or classes, and then okay, now we're no. And it isn't that people can just go off on their own and somehow become impervious to what happens to them at work. The issue is that they need to collaborate together. They need to say, here are the tensions that we're experiencing at work. And actually, we have some ideas about how we could alleviate some of those. And the employer, well, okay, well, we'll talk about that. But that's where the collaboration comes in. And we start that, as you mentioned with the intro, I work with organizations, particularly large hospitals, have been a number of them, but other kinds as well. Just how do you use that employee survey in the most effective way? Because I just keep seeing that these surveys tend to more annoy people than actually become something that everybody experiences as a thing of value and a joy forever.
I love what you're saying because
Yeah.
we have surveys up to our eyeballs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the frustrating thing for people on the receiving end of surveys is when they've completed a survey and nothing has changed
And that
as
has
a
changed.
result of
Yes. And that
so
is
that
a
just
very broad
escalates the
experience.
problem, right? That
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
that. So people, it's often that organizations implement surveys because they're told that they need to figure out what's going on. So they check that box and then they
Mm-hmm.
ignore the results and ignore taking action towards the changes in the relationship that need to be made.
And I find, when I talk with organizational leaders about this, it isn't so much ignoring as often they don't really know, well, what do you do? And it really isn't the roadway for starting this survey thing to actually making some changes is not mapped out that well. And secondly, they haven't done enough. Like part of the thing that one needs to do at the very beginning is to, like the group, let's say there's a working group that's doing the survey, and is to, well, what are the possibilities here? What kind of message do we think we're going to get? Let's just imagine, what do we think we're going to get from these folks? And then what do we have to offer if we do get one, in each of those scenarios? Think through a few scenarios. What do we have to offer? And let's do a lot of work beforehand. It's like, let's build the bridges that we need with the CEO, with the head of medicine, to whatever group, patient rights groups, whatever groups are with the unions. What bridges do we need to build so that we can respond by doing something important? A lot of the things are like, okay, these surveys often point out really important things that need to be changed. And changing really important things in a hospital is a very big deal, or any kind of large organization. And so who has the authority to change that? How do we go through the process of checks and balances to make sure the changes we make to accommodate this problem doesn't create another problem over here? How are we going to do that? It is not a matter of just simply applying best practices. It's very much a creative problem-solving process with a lot of dialogue, with a lot of stakeholders, and finding a way from here, where are we today, to where we need to be. So I think that's really a big piece of it. I mean, the survey.
I'd love to highlight what you said, because you said some very important things that I don't want them to miss. It is a collaborative process that requires teamwork and outside the box thinking and problem solving. This is not about just collecting information. This is about seeing the possibilities. And so one of the important things about this is that it's tapping into the creative part of your brain to see things outside of the box instead of looking at the problem the same way that we look at the problem. So that requires curiosity and a spirit of openness to see what can be adjusted here. And it reminds me of something in the book that you and Christina talk about, that when we add new policies, we need to take care to remove some things that are no longer working. Otherwise, it just adds more burden on the employee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I spent much of my life working in a university, and universities always love to add a new program, and they hate ever having to end an existing program. And they do it to themselves, but it's just part of human nature to always want to expand in that way. But yeah, you've got to look what's going on here. So a survey, when you've got thousands of people in an organization, you really can't go. The CEO can't go around and chat with everybody about what's going on. It's just logistically it doesn't happen. But surveys, a well-designed one, use real solid. And that's why I work with this group Mind Garden in California that does the surveys, and they use really solid, well-researched instruments to assess what's going on, and you get that info. Now you've got some information, but questionnaires don't do it by themselves. It's very important that whoever's running the survey knows about written comments, giving people a few questions like, what would you change? Yeah. If you could change 2 things in your job, what would you change? Like a question like that as an open-ended, because a place I work with, they're doing a question like that, a few other questions. They had over 300,000 words of written comments added to which I read them all. A few other people in the hospital read them all, but that's a big book. That's a big book. And so that kind of stuff, now you're getting a lot of detail. The surveys give you the broad strokes and identify generally, here are the issues. And are they about workload? Are they about a sense of control? Are they about rewards and recognition? Are they about fairness, community? Or is it our core values? Those are the 6 areas that we look at and talk about in the book. So they give you, where are mismatches on this? Where are people looking for a sense of fairness that they're not finding? Where are they saying, my values are for providing the best possible care for my patients, and it's not happening here? Where are those gaps? We got to identify those. But then what does that mean? The written comments give you the story. I worked with this patient and here's what happened. So that's where you're getting a much greater depth in your communication than how people can just tick boxes. You need them both, but you need them both.
Love what you are saying, because what you're saying is we're really tapping into the collaborative wisdom of all of the people, especially those on the front lines. Sometimes as administrators, we could be a little detached from what really is happening with the boots on the ground, basically. And so by putting in one or two of these questions, now your surveys can't all be write-in answers, right? But by putting in one or two key questions, you can create and gather all of this wisdom that helps guide the thinking outside the box ideas that we're talking about here to create something beautiful. And just think of the buy-in you will get from your staff when you've taken some of their ideas and say, hey, that is a great idea. We've never seen it like that before. We've not looked at it like that. Let's see how we can build on that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, and because you'll find with that again, people, different sectors of a large organization, like really what's going on the top executive level, it's a whole different world, a whole different set of constraints, priorities, threats that they're dealing with than folks out on, the clinic floor or in the OR. They're just dealing with totally different kinds of issues. And you've got to build this bridge and say, here's how we're looking at the world. And it isn't that we don't care about your world, but we do have these other things that we need to do. We really do need to get some money into this place or everybody's going to be really unhappy. And it's not that we just only care about money. It's just, but that is our job, is to get the money. And then the people on the front lines can be talking, well, these are the constraints that we're working with, and we don't think we're aligning things. Allows that dialogue to happen really openly. And that's where the collaboration starts with that communication. One, it's coming from the employees, coming centrally in through the survey. And now the working group needs to have its rollout plan. How do we now go back to everybody and say, here's the message that we got? And a lot of places do that too superficially. Here's really overall. You got to take that. Hospitals, again, other large organizations, particularly hospitals, they're really different. They're very complex. There's different segments that have totally different concerns than other segments do. It's big, it's complicated. So you got to be able to drill down, have a whole action plan, how you're going to now do the feedback. Here's what we got. What do you think of that? What are some ideas? What do you think we should go from here? What are some directions to go? So you've got this whole dialogue, and that ending with that item where you say, what are one or two ideas? What are the two things that you'd like to change? And you end on that and say, change. That's what we're going to work on now. We've got a process. It's a careful process. We can't just do it like that, but we've got a process we're starting where we're going to start changing some serious stuff here. And then, that whole dialogue's got to be laid out. People have to think about what are some quick changes that we can do? What can we do in the short term? Some quick fixes, some easy wins, some low-hanging fruit, whatever you want to put it, that we can do really soon, just to show we're listening and we're going to change things. So that all that needs to be happening with a rollout, a dialogue, some action points that get, and then how you communicate those. You've got to have a communication plan together, how you want to get the information out to everybody that not only did we change this, here's the whole rationale for changing it is because we were listening to you. And get that whole message across. It's complicated, but short of that, people are going to go, oh yeah, well, they changed something. I don't know what it was. They got patients to deal with. What are they worried about how you're communicating? They've got too much stuff to do. So that's that. And then that allows you to customize. That's the first part's collaboration. Second one's customize means you're going to use all that information to fit it to the folks who were here and come up with a solution that they can say, yeah, that's our solution. I had a part in that. Yeah.
So let me interrupt you for one moment and ask a question. Now, as we're customizing, do hospitals or organizations do the changes in all departments at once? Or have you noticed it might be wiser to start with a few key departments and then spread out the changes?
Right.
What's your
Well,
experience?
I think, well, you've got a bit of both going on, and it depends on the level of the mismatch that you're dealing with. And mismatches is what we're, those are the tension points in the relationship with the mismatches. And some of them you can look, as you're looking across the survey and the written comments and the survey responses, you can see across this whole organization, there's a particular tension that everybody's got. It might have to do with fairness. It might have to do with appreciation or money. Who knows? But what? So some things you can say we can do a broad policy change. It's going to affect a lot of people across this organization, but it does get to the nub of an important issue that we're seeing people talk about here. And if you got one of those, that you got to, again, it takes time to get everything aligned to make a change on a major policy. But that's, you got to look at that and work towards it. But there's a whole lot that really you got to drill down to the work group kind of level and see what's going on, what are their dynamics, how are they working with each other, and what are the particular issues for them. Because as I look at, you can do profiles of different units, both in terms of their concerns as well as what are they experiencing in terms of the core dimensions of burnout and their relationship. You can map those, and they need different kinds of responses. And doing the same thing for everybody is going to just cause more trouble than benefit.
Yes. Oh, I love what you're saying, because what you're saying requires potentially different solutions for different parts of the hospital, depending upon the needs. I mean, the needs might be a managerial training need,
Yeah.
right? It could be that in one unit, and it could be a resource issue in another unit, right? So looking at those things individually helps us to really customize the changes that you're talking about making.
Right. That's the question. Yeah, that is in there. And part of that, again, comes with the data analysis. You've got, your survey data for the whole operation. And is it structured properly so you can drill down at the different levels and provide those profiles? Like with one group I'm working with, I provide, what called the urgent unit profile. So these are the ones in terms, I look at how their scores are on the exhaustion and cynicism and discouragement of burnout, those kind of qualities. What's going on with those? What's going on with their relationships among each other? What are they really seeing as big problems? So I could say these are the ones that are out there. These are on that long tail in the negative direction of all your units. And these are the issues that they have. And then you can do recommendations, or here are some actions that can address those particular pieces. But you got to get into the data, you got to read what the comments are, and you got to find out what each of those settings has as particular concern.
I love what you're saying. I think it's so important. Would you mind just touching briefly on some of those key indicators of workplace mismatch that you and Christina talk about in your book?
Right. The points of mismatch that we look at. I mean, right. One of them, a big one is workload. Workload gets a lot of press, and people say, well, people are burned out because they're working too hard. And well, that's part of it, but it's only part of it. But it's definitely having too much work to do, having the wrong kind of work to do, having work that particularly invades your personal life too much rather than staying at work. But there's a whole lot about the workload that can be mismatched between what people want to be getting themselves into and what they got. The second one is control, which is like, can you work the way you want to work? How much control do you have over when you work, who you work with, where you work, how you work, what do you apply? And, there's always a dialogue there because the employer wants you to actually do a particular job. So you can't just wander off and do another job. But, you have enough latitude that you feel right with it and you can adapt your day so that, that's a fulfilling experience for you. The third one has to do with reward, which, money's part of it, but also just the intrinsic reward. Are you doing the kind of stuff that matters to you? And then there's the social part. Are you working with people who express appreciation to you? Is that just part of your life, or is that a rare absent event? Community, which goes into community, the third one, which is just sort of the quality of relationships. I spent a lot of focus on that in my work. Fairness. Fairness is huge. When people feel treated unfairly, disrespected, they feel just excluded from the community. They feel like outcast, and then they withdraw. It's a really negative thing there. And then the sixth one is values, which is just my values and my organization's values are alike. Is sort of one of the core items there. Can you agree? Do you agree? And the more you agree with that, the more you feel whatever I'm working on, it's furthering both what I want and what I care about, and what my employer cares about. And that's a really good place to be. If you're working across purposes, then it's very frustrating for folks. So those are the 6 areas. And what we're looking at, people bring into the workplace aspirations, hopes, needs, motivations. And does the setting further those, nurture those, or is it putting roadblocks in the way? That's sort of the big piece there.
Yeah. So part of your work has focused on improving workplace civility to prevent burnout. So what convinced you that improving workplace social dynamics has the potential for addressing burnout?
Right. It goes back to the very first article that Christina Maslach and I wrote. That was a while back in the 80s, actually, it was published. And it was essentially on co-worker relationships and supervisor relationships and how they related to burnout. So that was our first article way back when. And since then, I've always looked at that aspect of the work life, that's social, wanting to belong, wanting to be not just somebody that work group tolerates, but to be a respected, valued member of a work group is a very fundamental motivation for people. Like it's very primordial, and that being part of a group is just essential to survival as humans. We're not very good on our own. People are much more impressive as part of a group, and it's still that way now. The regard of your colleagues and your supervisors for you as a professional are vital to your well-being and your living in this world. So that's a very important motive. It's such that people are very good at reading into anything that people say, do, how they look at you, the facial expressions they make, the distance they keep, everything you can interpret. Do you like me, or am I part of this, or I'm? If you say good morning to somebody and they don't respond, does that did they not hear me, or we got something going on here? It's on your mind. Like, you can't just ignore that stuff. It's and people. So that is such an emotionally charged part of things. And we thought that when you look at we've got this social encounter scale that we use, and use it with our surveys, and it's just asking you things like, in the past month, how often has your supervisor expressed appreciation to you, or a colleague? How often has that happened? Once or twice or 10 times, or how often does that happen? And then ask on the negative side, how often has somebody been rude to you? A colleague or a supervisor been rude to you in the past month? And then we ask them, well, how often have you been appreciative? Have you expressed appreciation to a colleague for their work? Have you really? And how often have you been rude to other people? And we ask it, so all those kinds of things, and we start getting a map of what's the social domain that people are working with. And we find that how people are there, that balance of appreciation to rudeness, is a big predictor of whether they're going to be exhausted or cynical or discouraged at work. That's just a big piece of what's going on. And with the number of work that we've done, I did in Australia, I've done in Canada, and US before, if you can improve the quality of those relationships, if you can basically, that balance gets more positive, it doesn't have to be perfect, but more positive than negative, that burnout goes down. The indicators of burnout go down. So that is very powerful that way. And it's something, it's a win all around because everybody's happier if they got much more positive interactions. That's an immediate thing. And the burnout thing just rolls out as a downstream benefit of that kind of improvement.
I love what you're saying, and it fits in with our whole theme of the summit. We were made to connect. We were made to be in a relationship. And what you were referring to was has Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We need safety, we need relationship, we need to belong. All of those things are part of how we were created as humans. And when we take the human factor out of it and just work on policies and procedures and forget the human beings behind it, we're missing something.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
Okay, so I could talk to you all day, but we are going to honor our time here with our viewers. And so if you had to leave us with one last tip, what would that be?
Oh, basically, if things aren't going right with your work, the first part is just to track for yourself. Those areas of work life, those 6 areas, and we have a thing in the book where you can sort of track those. Get track over time. What is going on today with my work life in terms of workload, in terms of control, that kind of thing. Track your own experience on these core areas of work life and track that over time and start finding out what's working in your job and what's not working in your job, because that gives you a foundation to start building something.
I love that. Thank you so much.